It was a cold Tuesday night in downtown Chicago. The kind of night where the wind cuts right through your jacket and makes you wish you had stayed home. But for a 53-year-old janitor named, home was not an option. He had bills to pay. He had a small apartment to keep. And most importantly, he had his dignity to hold on to, even when the world seemed determined to take it away from him. Had just finished his shift at the office building across the street. His back ached from mopping floors for 8 straight hours. His hands were dry and cracked from the cleaning chemicals he used every single night. His shoes were old and worn out, and they made a soft squeaking sound with every step he took. But none of that mattered to him right now. Because tonight, something strange was pulling him toward the grand entrance of the hotel. He had walked past this hotel hundreds of times before. It was one of those fancy places where rich people stayed when they came to the city. The kind of place with golden door handles, marble floors, and employees who smiled at you only if you looked like you belonged. Had never stepped inside. He had no reason to, but tonight was different. Through the tall glass windows, he could see something that made his heart skip a beat. There, sitting in the middle of the hotel lobby, was a black grand piano. It was beautiful. The light from the chandelier above reflected off its polished surface like stars on a quiet lake. Stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at it like a man who had just seen a ghost from his past. He did not plan to go inside. He told himself to keep walking, but his feet would not listen. Before he knew it, he was pushing open the heavy glass door and stepping into the warm, golden light of the lobby. The smell hit him first. Fresh flowers and expensive perfume. The air was warm and clean, nothing like the cold, dusty hallways he had been cleaning all night. Soft jazz music played from hidden speakers. A few guests sat on velvet couches, sipping wine and talking in low voices. Nobody looked at him. Nobody noticed the tired man in the faded blue uniform standing near the entrance. His eyes went straight to the piano. It was roped off with a red velvet barrier like it was some kind of museum exhibit. A small sign next to it read, "For scheduled performances only." But barely noticed the sign. All he could see were the keys, white and black perfectly lined up, waiting to be touched. He had not touched a piano in over 25 years, not since the night that changed everything, not since the night he lost the only person who ever believed in him. The memories came rushing back like a wave he could not stop. His mother sitting beside him on the old piano bench in their tiny apartment. Her voice, soft and proud, telling him he was born for this. The standing ovations, the scholarships, the dreams that seemed so close he could almost hold them in his hands. And then the crash, the hospital, the silence that followed. Shook his head, trying to push the memories away. He was not here to think about the past. He was just here to look, just for a moment, just to remember what it felt like to be near something so beautiful. But then something happened, something he did not expect. His feet started moving again. Slowly, quietly, he walked toward the piano. He stopped just outside the velvet rope and stood there, staring at the keys like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. A voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Turned around. A woman in a black suit was walking toward him. She had a name tag pinned to her chest and her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. She was the front desk manager. Her smile was polite, but her eyes told a different story. They moved up and down, taking in his worn-out shoes, his faded uniform, the mop bucket smell that probably still clung to his clothes. Cleared his throat. "I was just wondering," he said quietly, "if I could play the piano just for a few minutes." The woman stopped walking. Her smile flickered for just a second before it returned, then before. "I am sorry, sir," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The piano is reserved for hotel guests and professional performers only. It is not available for public use." Nodded slowly. He had expected this. He did not know why he had even asked. "I understand," he said. "I just thought maybe, since no one is using it right now." "I am afraid that is not possible," the woman interrupted. She tilted her head slightly like she was explaining something to a child. We have certain standards to maintain. I am sure you understand." A few of the guests on the nearby couches had turned to watch, could feel their eyes on him. He could hear the whispers. He saw a man in an expensive suit lean over to his wife and say something that made her cover her mouth and laugh. Felt his face grow hot. He wanted to leave. He wanted to turn around and walk out and never come back, but something kept him rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was the look on the manager's face. Or maybe it was the memory of his mother's voice, telling him that his gift was not something to be ashamed of. "I used to play," said quietly, "a long time ago." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Her tone made it clear she did not believe him. She looked at his hands, rough and from years of hard labor. "Well, that is very nice. But as I said, the piano is not available." She turned to walk away, clearly done with the conversation. But then she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "Perhaps you could try one of the bars downtown. I hear some of them have open mic nights. You might have better luck there." More laughter from the couches. Felt something twist inside his chest. It was not anger. It was something deeper, something older. It was the same feeling he had felt 25 years ago when the doctors told him he would never play professionally again. When the record labels stopped calling. When his wife packed her bags and left. When the world decided he was nothing. He stood there in the middle of that beautiful lobby, surrounded by people who had everything, and he felt like the smallest man in the world. The manager was already back at her desk, typing something on her computer. The guests had gone back to their conversations. The piano sat silent behind its velvet rope, untouched and waiting. Should have left. Any reasonable person would have. But he did not move. He just stood there, staring at those black and white keys, feeling something stir inside him that he thought had died a long time ago. He did not know it yet, but the next few minutes were about to change everything. Not just for him, but for every single person in that room. What nobody in that hotel lobby knew, what nobody could have guessed by looking at the tired old janitor in his worn-out uniform, was that had once been one of the most gifted piano players in the entire country. It started when he was just 4 years old. His mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. They lived in a tiny apartment on the south side of Chicago, the kind of place where the heat never worked right in winter, and the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbors arguing at midnight. They did not have much, but they had each other, and they had an old upright piano that's grandmother had left behind when she passed away. One evening, mother came home from her shift at the diner to find her little boy sitting at that piano. His small fingers were moving across the keys, picking out a melody he had heard on the radio earlier that day. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her apron, and watched him with tears rolling down her cheeks. She knew right then that her son had been given something special, something rare, a gift that could not be taught or bought or earned. It was simply there, living inside him, waiting to come out. From that day on, everything changed. His mother saved every penny she could. She skipped meals so she could pay for his piano lessons. She took extra shifts on weekends so she could buy him sheet music. She sat beside him every night while he practiced, even when she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. She believed in him when no one else did. She told him again and again that his music was going to take him places she could only dream of. And she was right. By the time he was 10 years old, he was winning local competitions. By 12, he was performing at concert halls across the Midwest. Teachers and critics started calling him a prodigy. They said he played with a depth of emotion that most adults could never achieve. They said his fingers moved like they were guided by something beyond this world. At 15, received a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country. At 17, he made his debut at Carnegie Hall in New York City. He still remembered that night like it was yesterday. The red velvet seats stretching out into the darkness. The hush that fell over the crowd when he walked onto the stage. The way his mother looked at him from the front row, her eyes shining with pride, her hands clasped together like she was praying. He played Chopin that night, the Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was his mother's favorite piece. She used to hum it while she cooked dinner, while she folded laundry, while she tucked him into bed at night. When finished the last note, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was so loud it shook the walls, but did not hear any of it. All he could see was his mother standing in the front row, tears streaming down her face, mouthing the words, "I am so proud of you." After that night, the offers started pouring in. Record labels wanted to sign him. Managers wanted to represent him. Newspapers and magazines wanted to tell his story. The poor kid from the south side of Chicago who had risen from nothing to become one of the young talents in classical music. It was the kind of story people loved to hear, and was living it. By 20, he had released his first album. It sold more copies than anyone expected. Critics called him a once-in-a-generation talent. He was invited to perform at private events for governors and senators. He was talked about as someone who would change the world of music forever. His future was brighter than the spotlights that followed him across every stage. And then, on a rainy night in October, everything came crashing down. And his mother were driving home from a performance in Indiana. It was late, and the roads were slick with rain. Was in the passenger seat, going over the notes from that night's concert in his head. His mother was behind the wheel, humming softly to the radio, the same way she always did. Neither of them saw the truck coming. The driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. He crossed the center line doing 60 miles an hour. His mother tried to swerve, but there was no time. The impact was so violent that did not even remember it. All he remembered was waking up in a hospital bed 3 days later, his right hand wrapped in bandages, a doctor standing over him with a look on his face that said everything words could not. His mother did not survive the crash. She died at the scene, still holding onto the steering wheel, still trying to protect her son even in her final moments. Spent the next 6 months in and out of hospitals. His right hand had been shattered in the accident. The bones were broken in so many places that the doctors lost count. They did everything they could, multiple surgeries, months of physical therapy, but in the end they sat him down and told him the truth. He would never play professionally again. The damage was too severe. The precision, the speed, the control that had made him great, it was gone, and it was never coming back. Did not cry when they told him. He did not scream or shout or ask why. He just sat there in that hospital bed, staring at the wall, feeling something inside him go dark. It was not just his hand that had been broken that night. It was his entire reason for living. The years that followed were the hardest of his life. Without his music, did not know who he was. The record labels stopped calling. The managers moved on to other clients. The newspapers found new stories to tell. One by one, the people who had once surrounded him disappeared until he was completely alone. He tried to rebuild his life. He got married to a woman he met at a support group. For a while, things seemed like they might be okay, but the darkness inside him was too deep. He could not shake the grief, the guilt, the feeling that he should have been the one driving that night. His wife tried to help him, but eventually she could not take it anymore. She left after 3 years and did not blame her. He could barely stand to be around himself. He drifted from job to job after that, construction, warehouse work, delivery driving. Nothing lasted, nothing felt right. He started drinking to numb the pain, and for a while it worked. But the bottle only made things worse. He lost apartments. He lost friends. He lost every last shred of the life he had once known. Eventually, ended up where he was now, a janitor at an office building in downtown Chicago, 53 years old, alone, forgotten, mopping floors and cleaning toilets for minimum wage while the world moved on without him. He had not touched a piano in over 25 years. He could not. Every time he saw one, he heard his mother's voice. He saw her face in the front row at Carnegie Hall. He felt her hand on his shoulder, guiding him through a difficult passage. The memories were too painful, so he locked them away deep inside himself and pretended they did not exist. But tonight, standing in that hotel lobby, staring at that beautiful black grand piano, could feel those memories fighting to break free. He could hear his mother's voice whispering in his ear, the same words she had told him 1,000 times before. Your gift is not about fame, baby. It is not about money or awards or what other people think. Your gift is about the music, and the music will always be there waiting for you whenever you are ready to come back to it. Closed his eyes. His hands were trembling. The laughter of the hotel guests still echoed in his ears. The manager's words still stung like fresh wounds. But somewhere deep inside him, in a place he thought had died a long time ago, a small flame was starting to flicker back to life. Stood there in the middle of that hotel lobby, caught between two worlds, one foot in the past, one foot in the present. The laughter of the wealthy guests still rang in his ears. The manager had already gone back to her desk, typing away on her computer like he did not even exist. To her, he was nobody, just another tired old man who did not belong. But something was happening inside that he could not explain. It was like a door that had been locked for 25 years was slowly starting to crack open. Behind that door were all the things he had tried so hard to forget. The music, the applause, the feeling of his fingers dancing across the keys like they had a mind of their own, and most of all, his mother, her smile, her voice, the way she used to look at him like he was the most precious thing in the entire world. He should have walked away. That was the smart thing to do. That was what any normal person would have done. Just turn around, go home, forget this ever happened. Tomorrow he would wake up, go back to work, and everything would be the same as it always was. Safe, predictable, empty. But could not move. His feet felt like they were glued to the marble floor. His eyes stayed locked on that beautiful black piano sitting behind its velvet rope. And in his mind, he kept hearing his mother's voice, as clear as if she were standing right beside him. You were born for this, baby. Do not ever let anyone tell you different. His throat tightened. He blinked hard, trying to push back the tears that were threatening to spill over. He had spent so many years running away from this moment. So many years convincing himself that the music was dead, that the who used to light up concert halls no longer existed. He had buried that part of himself so deep that he thought it was gone forever. But it was not gone. It had been waiting for him to be brave enough to let it out again. The lobby was quiet now. The jazz music continued to play softly from the speakers. A bellhop walked past, pushing a cart full of luggage. A couple near the window laughed at something on their phone. Nobody was paying attention to the old janitor standing in the middle of the room, fighting the biggest battle of his life. Looked down at his hands. They were not the hands of a concert pianist anymore. They were rough and worn, covered in calluses and small scars from years of hard labor. His right hand, the one that had been shattered in the accident, still ached when the weather turned cold. The doctors had told him he would never have full control of it again, and for 25 years he had believed them. But what if they were wrong? What if there was still something left inside those broken fingers? What if the music had not abandoned him after all? Took a deep breath. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew what his mother would have wanted him to do, but the fear was overwhelming. What if he sat down at that piano and nothing came out? What if his hands failed him in front of all these people? The humiliation would be unbearable. It would confirm everything the manager and those laughing guests already believed about him, that he was nothing, that he did not belong. He was about to turn and walk away when he noticed someone watching him. It was an old man sitting alone on one of the velvet couches near the piano. He looked to be in his late 70s, maybe early 80s. His hair was silver white, and deep lines creased his face like the pages of an old book. He was dressed simply, in a brown cardigan and khaki pants, nothing fancy like the other guests. A wooden cane rested against the arm of the couch beside him. The old man was not laughing. He was not whispering to anyone or looking at with judgment in his eyes. He was just watching, quietly, patiently, like he was waiting to see what would do next. Their eyes met across the lobby. Felt something pass between them in that moment, something he could not put into words. It was like the old man could see right through him. Like he knew exactly what was feeling, exactly what he was afraid of, exactly what was at stake. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the lobby seemed to fade into the background. It was just the two of them, connected by something invisible and powerful. Then the old man did something that changed everything. Slowly, with effort, he reached for his cane and pushed himself up from the couch. He walked over to the velvet rope that surrounded the piano, his steps careful but determined. When he reached the rope, he stopped and looked back at. And then, without saying a word, he unhooked the rope and let it fall to the side. His breath caught in his throat. The old man gestured toward the piano bench with a small nod of his head. His eyes were kind, filled with a warmth that had not seen in a very long time. "Go ahead, son," the old man said quietly. His voice was gentle but steady. "Play." Did not move at first. He just stood there, staring at the open path to the piano, feeling like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward, and there was no going back. One step forward, and he would have to face everything he had been running from for the past 25 years. The manager looked up from her desk. Her eyes went wide when she saw the velvet rope hanging loose. She started to stand, her mouth opening to say something. But the old man held up his hand, and something in his expression made her stop. She sat back down slowly, her face uncertain. Looked at the piano. The keys gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier. They were waiting for him. They had always been waiting for him. He thought about his mother. He thought about all the nights she had sat beside him on that old piano bench in their tiny apartment, listening to him practice until his fingers were sore. He thought about the sacrifices she had made, the meals she had skipped, the extra shifts she had worked, all so he could chase his dream. He thought about the last thing she had ever said to him, just minutes before the accident. "I am so proud of you, baby. No matter what happens, I will always be proud of you." His eyes filled with tears. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. But for the first time in 25 years, he was not running away. He took a step forward, then another, and another. The marble floor felt solid beneath his worn-out shoes. The distance to the piano seemed to stretch out forever, like he was walking through a dream. When he finally reached the bench, he stopped and just stood there for a moment, looking down at the keys. They were so beautiful, so familiar, like the face of an old friend he had not seen in decades. Slowly sat down. The bench creaked slightly under his weight. He placed his hands on his knees and took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. His heart was racing. His palms were sweating. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to get up and run. But he did not run, not this time. He lifted his hands and held them over the keys. His fingers were trembling. The scars on his right hand seemed to glow under the light. 25 years of pain and grief and loneliness hung in the air around him like a heavy fog. The lobby had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching now. The manager stood frozen behind her desk. The wealthy guests on the couches had stopped their conversations. Even the bellhops had paused to see what was happening. Closed his eyes. He thought about his mother one last time. He could almost feel her beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, her voice whispering in his ear. "Play, baby, play for me." And so he did. The first note was wrong. His finger slipped, hitting two keys at once, and the sound that came out was harsh and ugly. It echoed through the silent lobby like a crack of thunder. He heard someone snicker behind him. His face burned with shame. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to stop, to get up, to run out of that hotel and never look back. But he did not stop. He took a breath and tried again. This time a single note rang out. It was soft, uncertain, like a whisper in a crowded room. Let it hang in the air for a moment, listening to it fade away. It had been so long since he had heard that sound, so long since he had felt the smooth ivory beneath his fingertips. It was like meeting a part of himself he thought had died a long time ago. He played another note, then another, slowly, carefully, like a man learning to walk again after years in a wheelchair. His right hand was stiff and clumsy. The fingers did not move the way they used to. There were moments when they refused to cooperate at all, when they hit the wrong keys or moved too slowly, but kept going. He pushed through the mistakes, through the pain, through the fear that was screaming in his head. And then something started to change. The notes began to connect. One flowed into the next, then the next, forming a melody that knew better than his own heartbeat. It was Chopin, the Ballade number 1 in G minor, his mother's favorite piece. The same piece he had played at Carnegie Hall all those years ago, with her sitting in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Had not planned to play this song. He had not planned to play anything at all, but his hands seemed to know what to do even when his mind did not. They moved across the keys like they were remembering a conversation from long ago, picking up right where they had left off. The music filled the lobby. It started soft and gentle, like the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The notes floated through the air, wrapping around everyone in the room like a warm blanket. The snickering stopped. The whispers faded. One by one, the people in that lobby stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the old janitor sitting at the grand piano. Did not see them. His eyes were closed now, and he was somewhere else entirely. He was back in that tiny apartment on the south side of Chicago, sitting on the old piano bench with his mother beside him. He could smell her perfume. He could feel her hand resting gently on his back. He could hear her voice humming along to the melody, the same way she always did. The music grew stronger. The gentle beginning gave way to something deeper, something more powerful. His fingers moved faster now, dancing across the keys with a speed and precision that surprised even him. The stiffness in his right hand was still there, but it did not matter anymore. The music was bigger than the pain. It was bigger than the fear. It was bigger than all the years of grief and loneliness that had weighed him down for so long. He played like a man possessed. Every note carried 25 years of unspoken words. Every chord held a lifetime of tears that had never been cried. The ballade built and built, rising like a wave that refused to break. It filled every corner of that grand lobby. It bounced off the marble walls and the crystal chandeliers and the tall glass windows. It reached into the hearts of everyone who heard it and grabbed hold of something deep inside. The manager stood frozen behind her desk. Her mouth hung open slightly, and her eyes were wide with disbelief. This was not possible. This could not be the same man she had dismissed just minutes ago. This could not be the tired old janitor in the faded uniform who had asked to play the piano like a child asking for a piece of candy. But it was. It was him, and he was playing like nothing she had ever heard before. The wealthy guests on the velvet couches had stopped laughing. The man in the expensive suit who had whispered something cruel to his wife was now leaning forward, his drink forgotten in his hand. His wife had tears running down her cheeks. She did not even bother to wipe them away. A bellhop stood near the elevators, a stack of towels in his arms, completely motionless. A young woman who had been walking through the lobby stopped in her tracks and pulled out her phone, recording the performance with trembling hands. Even the doorman, who had seen 1,000 guests come and go, stepped inside to listen. And in the corner, sitting on the velvet couch with his wooden cane beside him, the old man who had unhooked the rope was smiling. It was a quiet smile, full of knowing, like he had seen this coming all along. His eyes glistened with tears, but he made no move to wipe them away. He just sat there and listened, nodding his head gently to the rhythm of the music. Reached the heart of the ballade. This was the part that had always made his mother cry. The melody slowed, became tender, almost heartbreaking in its beauty. It was the sound of loss, the sound of longing, the sound of a love so deep that even death could not destroy it. Thought about his mother. He thought about the night of the accident. He thought about all the things he had never got to say to her, all the thank yous, all the I love yous, all the moments they would never share. The tears he had been holding back for 25 years finally broke free. They rolled down his cheeks and fell onto the piano keys, but he did not stop playing. He could not stop. Not now. Not when he was finally saying goodbye. The music built again, rising toward its climax. Hands flew across the keys, faster and faster, pouring everything he had into every single note. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. There was only the music, filling the air like a living thing, demanding to be heard. And then with one final chord, it was over. The last note hung in the air for a long, long moment. It echoed off the walls and faded slowly into silence. Sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the keys, his eyes still closed. His chest rose and fell with each heavy breath. His face was wet with tears. For a few seconds there was nothing. Complete silence. Did not know if anyone was still there. He did not know if they had all walked away in disgust. He did not know anything except that he had finally done what he should have done 25 years ago. He had played for his mother one last time. And then the silence broke. It started with a single person clapping, then another, and then, like a dam bursting open, the entire lobby erupted in applause. Opened his eyes. He turned around slowly on the piano bench and saw something he never expected. Every single person in that lobby was on their feet. The wealthy guests, the bellhops, the doorman, the young woman with her phone. Even the manager who had dismissed him so coldly just minutes ago was standing behind her desk, clapping with tears in her eyes. The applause was deafening. It washed over like a wave, warm and overwhelming. People were cheering. People were crying. A few were shaking their heads in disbelief, like they still could not process what they had just witnessed. Did not know what to do. He just sat there on the piano bench, looking out at all those faces, feeling something he had not felt in a very, very long time. He felt alive. The applause lasted for what felt like forever. Sat on that piano bench, overwhelmed, unable to move. People were walking toward him now. Strangers with tears in their eyes, reaching out to shake his hand, to pat him on the shoulder, to tell him that was the most beautiful thing they had ever heard. He did not know what to say. He just nodded and whispered thank you over and over again, still trying to understand what had just happened. The manager was one of the first to reach him. She pushed through the small crowd that had gathered around the piano, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her face was different now. The coldness was gone. The judgment was gone. In its place was something that looked like shame mixed with wonder. She stopped a few feet away from him, like she was afraid to get too close. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she could not seem to meet his eyes. "I am so sorry," she said quietly. Her voice was shaking. "I had no idea. I should not have spoken to you that way. I should not have assumed." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Looked at her for a long moment. He thought about how she had laughed at him, how she had looked at his worn-out shoes and his faded uniform and decided he was worth nothing, how her words had cut into him like a knife. But he did not feel angry, not anymore. The music had washed all of that away. It had cleaned out the bitterness and the hurt and left something softer in its place, something that felt a lot like peace. "It is okay," said gently. "You did not know." The manager shook her head. "That is no excuse. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I was cruel and I am deeply sorry." Reached out and touched her arm lightly. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is what we do after. You are here now. That is enough." The manager's eyes filled with fresh tears. She nodded quickly, unable to speak, and stepped back into the crowd. Turned and saw the old man making his way toward him. He moved slowly, leaning on his wooden cane, but there was a lightness in his step that had not been there before. When he reached the piano, he stopped and looked at with those kind, knowing eyes. "That was something special," the old man said softly. "I have been listening to music my whole life, and I have never heard anything quite like that." Shook his head. "I do not even know how it happened. I have not played in 25 years. I thought I had forgotten everything." The old man smiled. Some things cannot be forgotten. They live inside us, waiting for the right moment to come back. He paused and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small business card. My name is not important, but I spent 40 years teaching music at the conservatory downtown. I have trained some of the finest pianists in the country, and I am telling you, what you have is rare. It is a gift that should not be hidden away. Took the card and looked at it. There was a name and a phone number, nothing more. He did not recognize the name, but something about the way the old man spoke told him this was not an ordinary person. I am too old to start over, said quietly. My hand is damaged. I cannot play the way I used to. The old man shook his head firmly. You do not need to play the way you used to. You need to play the way you play now. What I heard tonight was not about perfect technique. It was about heart. It was about soul. That is something no injury can take away. He placed his hand on shoulder and squeezed gently. There are people out there who need to hear what you have to say. Children who have never been told they are special. Adults who have forgotten what it feels like to dream. You have a voice that can reach them. Do not let it stay silent any longer. Looked down at the card in his hand. His vision blurred with tears. For so long, he had believed his story was over. He had accepted that he would spend the rest of his life mopping floors and fading into the background, invisible and forgotten. But maybe that was not true. Maybe his story was just beginning a new chapter. The old man smiled one last time, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Never saw him again after that night. Sometimes he wondered if the old man had been real at all, or if he had been something else entirely. A messenger, a guardian, a final gift from his mother, sent to remind him who he really was. The days that followed were strange and wonderful. Someone in the lobby that night had posted a video of his performance online. By the next morning, it had been viewed over 100,000 times. By the end of the week, it had reached millions. His face was everywhere. News stations wanted to interview him. Newspapers wanted to tell his story. People from all over the world were sending him messages, telling him how his music had touched them, how it had made them cry, how it had inspired them to chase their own forgotten dreams. Did not care about the fame. He did not want to be a celebrity, but he did want to play again. He wanted to share the gift his mother had given him with anyone who needed to hear it. He started small. He volunteered at a community center on the south side of Chicago, not far from the apartment where he had grown up. He taught piano lessons to kids who could not afford them, the same way teachers had once taught him for free when his mother could not pay. He played at nursing homes for elderly people who had no one else to visit them. He performed at shelters for families who had lost everything, giving them a few minutes of beauty in the middle of their pain. He never charged a single dollar. He never asked for anything in return. He just played. And every time he sat down at a piano, he thought about his mother. He thought about her sacrifice, her love, her unshakable belief that his gift was meant to be shared with the world. A year later, founded a small nonprofit organization. Its mission was simple: to bring music education to children who would never have access to it otherwise. He named it after his mother. The organization started with just a handful of students, but it grew quickly. Donations poured in from people who had seen the video, who had read his story, who believed in what he was trying to do. Never played at Carnegie Hall again. He never made another album or performed for governors and senators, but he did not need any of that. He had found something far more valuable than fame or money or applause. He had found his purpose. He had found a way to honor his mother's memory every single day. And he had found peace, real peace, for the first time in 25 years. Sometimes late at night, when the community center was empty and the streets outside were quiet, would sit alone at the old upright piano in the corner. He would close his eyes and play softly, just for himself. And in those moments, he could swear he felt his mother sitting beside him, her hand resting gently on his back, her voice whispering in his ear. "I am so proud of you, baby. I always knew you would find your way back." would smile, tears rolling down his cheeks, and keep playing, because the music had never really left him. It had been waiting all along for him to be brave enough to let it out again. And now that it was free, he was never going to let it go.